David Ashford was 44 years old, and his wife had just walked into the biggest mistake of her life. She just did not know it yet. Portia had a plan. A careful, patient, 3-year plan. She was going to file for divorce and walk away with $250 million. Half of everything. Half of the $500 million David built from nothing. Loading trucks in Compton at 16. Sleeping 4 hours a night in his 30s. Sacrificing everything most men his age took for granted. $500 million that existed before Portia Weston ever set foot in his life. She had already consulted her attorney, already drafted the settlement demand, already counted the money. She sat across from David every morning at breakfast, kissed him on the cheek, and smiled, completely certain she had already won. What Portia never considered, not once in 3 years of planning, was the 41-page document she signed before the wedding. The one David's attorney had spent months making airtight. The one with Portia's signature on every single page. She was about to find out exactly what it said. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The office was not supposed to look like this. That was the first thing people said, the few times anyone came to visit. They expected something bigger. Glass walls, maybe. A view that announced itself, some visible proof of the number attached to his name. Instead, they found a converted bedroom at the back of a modest house in Calabasas. Cream walls, a plain oak desk, a window that looked out onto a small yard with 2 lemon trees David had planted himself and never gotten around to replacing when they stopped producing. He liked it this way, always had. David Ashford believed, with the quiet certainty of a man who had earned the right to believe whatever he wanted, that wealth worn on the outside was wealth on its way out. He had seen it happen too many times. Men who built something real and then spent their energy performing it for everyone around them until the performance was all that was left. He had no interest in that. He sat at his plain desk on Tuesday mornings, drank coffee from the same ceramic mug he had owned for 11 years, and ran a $500 million operation from a room that looked like it belonged to a high school history teacher. His mother would have appreciated that. He grew up in Compton. That fact was not a story he told for effect. It was simply where he came from, the same way the sun came up in the east. His father left when David was 9. No fight, no dramatic exit. The man just stopped coming home one week, and eventually it became clear he was not coming back. David's mother, Nora, was a schoolteacher at Willowbrook Elementary who wore the same 4 cardigans in rotation and kept a budget on notebook paper inside a kitchen drawer. She never complained. She stretched what she had across what he needed, and she did it every day without making him feel the weight of it. He started loading trucks at a distribution warehouse in Compton at 16. He told himself it was for the money. That was true. But the other truth, the one he only understood later, was that he was watching. He saw how the freight moved, where it slowed down, which handoffs broke the chain and cost time and money that nobody at the top was accounting for. He was 17 years old, and he was already seeing things the people who ran the place could not see, because they had stopped looking. By 24, he had his first freight contract, a small one. Nothing that would impress anyone, but it was his, and he ran it with the same precision he had been storing up in silence for 8 years. By 32, Ashford Logistics was moving freight for 3 Fortune 500 companies. By 40, he had expanded into commercial real estate and accumulated $500 million in fully audited wealth. Every dollar of it earned before Portia Weston ever walked into his life. He still called Nora every Sunday. He still drove himself to the taco truck on Figueroa that he and Ray had been eating at since they were both broke and 20-something and too stubborn to admit they were scared. Ray Okafor was his COO now and his best friend always, And they still argued about whether the carne asada had gotten worse since the owner's son took over the grill. Ray said yes. David said he was being dramatic. Neither of them was going to stop going. He met Portia at a charity gala 5 years ago. She was warm, she was smart. She seemed, and this was the part he had turned over in his mind many times since, genuinely unbothered by what he had. Most people, when they learned the number, started adjusting. Their posture changed. Their attention sharpened in a way that had nothing to do with him. Portia did none of that. She asked him what he was reading. She argued with him about a documentary they had both seen. She laughed at the right moments and went quiet at the right moments and felt, across 2 years of dating, like someone who simply wanted to be near him. He proposed. His mother came to dinner the weekend before the engagement and sat across from Portia at a restaurant in Pasadena and was perfectly gracious the entire evening. Then, in the car on the way back to Compton, Nora said the thing she had been holding all night. "Baby, I hope you're seeing her clearly." David told her she was being protective. He told her Portia was good for him. He told her she would come around. He married Portia anyway. The marriage was easy, on the surface. Portia was warm and present. She managed the joint household account David funded generously each month and kept the house running without complaint. She came to his company events and remembered people's names and made him look in every visible way like a man who had gotten it right. That Tuesday morning, she appeared in the doorway of his office with a carry-on and a weekender bag, and told him she was heading to Scottsdale for a long weekend with her friend Dana. She kissed him on the cheek. She smelled like the perfume he had bought her for her birthday in March. He watched her carry both bags toward the front door. He looked at those bags, the carry-on and the weekender together, and something in him registered a small, quiet contradiction. 3 days did not need that much. He almost said something. He did not. The call came at 12:47 p.m. David was at his actual office, the Ashford Logistics Building in El Segundo, on the 3rd floor, where the windows finally did offer a view worth looking at, reviewing a freight routing proposal when his cell phone lit up on the desk. Ray's name on the screen. He picked up. "Hey." "Hey." Ray paused. One beat too long. "You got a minute?" David set the proposal down. In 20 years, Ray Okafor had called him with bad news exactly 6 times. A warehouse fire in 2009, a contract dispute in 2014, his father's health scare in 2018, and a few others that had rearranged the shape of things. David knew Ray's regular voice, and he knew his careful voice, and this was the careful one. Slower, lower, the one where Ray was choosing every word before it left his mouth. "I got a minute," David said. "What is it?" "So I had a client lunch downtown today." Ray stopped again. "Nobu. The one on La Cienega." David waited. "I saw Portia." The room did not change. The freight proposal was still on the desk. The view was still there. David's coffee was still warm in its cup. Everything stayed exactly where it was, and David stayed exactly where he was inside it. "She wasn't alone," Ray said. "Some guy. I didn't recognize him. They were at a corner table, and it didn't look like lunch between friends, man. It was close. It went long. And before they wrapped up, the guy handed her a folder. Ray's voice dropped a little lower. She went through the papers inside. She smiled at something. Then she signed. David said nothing. She looked comfortable, Ray said. Not nervous. Not like someone doing something fast. Like she had done it before, or like she knew exactly what she was looking at. The silence stretched long enough that Ray said his name. "David." "Yeah," David said. "I'm here. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know if I should call, but I couldn't not." "No," David said. "You did right." He meant it. His voice was even. "Thank you, Ray. You good? I'll talk to you later." He set the phone down. He did not move for 45 minutes. He did not look at the freight proposal. He did not answer the 2 emails that came in during that time. He sat in his chair and looked at a point somewhere past the window and thought about nothing specific, or maybe everything at once, everything compressed into a pressure behind his sternum that he was not going to let become something visible. Not here, not yet. At 1:34 p.m., he picked up his phone and called Adrienne Cole. She answered on the second ring the way she always did. "David." "Adrienne, I need you to do something for me quietly." He kept his voice flat and professional, the same voice he used for contract negotiations and difficult conversations and every situation in his life that required him to be the calmest person in the room. "Pull the prenup, the full document. Review it start to finish and tell me where we stand." A short silence on her end. Not confused. Adrienne was never confused. More like she was reading the space between his words, which she had always been better at than most people he knew. 24 hours, she said. "Thank you." She did not ask a single question. That was Adrienne. That had always been Adrienne. He had been her client for 20 years, since the first freight contract. And somewhere across all those deals and negotiations, she had learned to hear what he was not saying and respond to that instead. He trusted her with the things he could not fully say out loud yet. She had never once given him a reason not to. He cleared his afternoon. He drove home. Portia was already there when he arrived. She looked up from the kitchen counter with a bright, easy smile, her carry-on propped against the wall by the hallway. She said Dana's daughter had come down sick, and she had caught an early flight back. She asked if he was hungry. She asked about his day. David leaned against the doorframe and listened and said the right things back. He asked about Dana. He said he was glad she was home. He smiled at the right moments. He had learned, across 20 years in business, that the most dangerous thing you could do when you suspected betrayal was let the other person know. Suspicion shown too early was a weapon handed to the wrong side, so he gave her nothing. He gave her warmth and normalcy and a version of himself she had no reason to doubt. After dinner, they watched something on television that he could not have recalled an hour later. She fell asleep against his shoulder on the couch, and he sat very still beneath the weight of her, looking at the far wall. He waited until her breathing had been slow and even for a long time. Then he moved carefully into the kitchen, opened his laptop on the counter, and logged into the joint household account. He had set the account up 2 months after the wedding, a gesture of trust. He funded it generously every month, enough for the house, for travel, for whatever she needed, and he had never once looked closely at where it went, because he had trusted her with it completely. He looked now. The transaction history loaded in rows on the screen, clean, evenly spaced. He scrolled slowly. The transfers were not large. That was the first thing he noticed. Whoever had designed this was careful. Each one small enough to look routine, sized deliberately below the thresholds that triggered automatic flags. A few thousand here, a few more there. Patient, consistent. He pulled up a calculator on his phone. He started adding. 3 separate LLCs, names he did not recognize. 18 months of transfers, 1 layer at a time, like water wearing a groove into stone so slowly you would never notice until the groove was already deep. The total came to $4.2 million. He stared at the number for a long moment. Then he closed the laptop. He turned off the kitchen light. He sat down in the chair by the window where the yard was dark, and the 2 lemon trees were just shapes against the night sky. He sat there until 4 a.m. David made French toast in the morning. He did it the same way he always did. Thick cut bread, a little vanilla in the egg mixture, the pan at medium heat so nothing burned. He set 2 plates on the kitchen island and poured Portia's coffee the way she liked it, with oat milk and 1 spoon of sugar, and when she came downstairs in her robe, she smiled at him like the sun coming through a window. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted to," he said. He watched her eat. And he talked about nothing. A routing issue at work, the lemon trees needing trimming, whether they should do something for her birthday next month. She laughed at something he said. She touched his hand across the counter. He looked at her face across the breakfast table and kept his own face exactly where he needed it to be. At 8:15, he pushed back from his stool and said he had a call to take care of before 9. She waved him off without concern. He kissed her cheek, picked up his keys, and walked out the front door. He drove straight to Century City. Adrienne's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Avenue of the Stars. The elevator opened onto a lobby that was clean and quiet, and had no artwork on the walls, just dark wood, clean lines, and the kind of stillness that meant the person working there did not need to convince anyone of anything. Her assistant showed him in without a word. Adrienne was at her desk when he entered, her reading glasses on, a thick document open in front of her with color-coded tabs running down the right edge. She looked up when he walked in. She did not say good morning. She said, "Sit down." He sat. She folded her hands on the desk. "I pulled the prenup. I also pulled something else." She slid a single page across the desk toward him. "Portia consulted a family law attorney 6 weeks ago. A man named Victor Hale, Century City, specializes in high-asset divorce. I have a contact in his building. She met with him twice." David looked at the page. A date, an address, 2 appointment blocks, hand-noted. Hale told her the prenup had challengeable weaknesses. Adrienne continued. Signing under incomplete disclosure, ambiguous language around asset appreciation, inadequate independent counsel at execution. She paused. "Those are the 3 standard angles. They are also the 3 angles I anticipated when I drafted it and closed off, one by one, in the document itself." She let that land. She is planning to file within 60 days. She believes she will receive half the marital estate. Based on Hale's assessment, she is expecting to walk out of this marriage with approximately $250 million. David set the page down. His hands were steady. "Show me the prenup," he said. Adrienne turned the document around and walked him through it. 41 pages. Every tab labeled in her neat, precise handwriting. The asset classification section came first. Language she read aloud in a level voice, neither rushing nor performing, just reading words she had chosen a long time ago with this exact possibility in mind. Every dollar of Ashford Logistics, all subsidiaries, all associated holdings, every piece of real estate, every investment account, every equity position, every dollar of appreciation from the day of signing forward, classified as irrevocable separate property, not subject to division, not subject to claim. The estate was valued at $500 million at the date of marriage, Adrienne said. Every cent of it, and every cent it has grown into since, sits outside the marital estate completely. She turned to the independent counsel tab. Signatures, notarized, time-stamped. Portia's attorney at the time, a woman named Geraldine Foss, solo practitioner, licensed and documented, had signed the acknowledgement page. Disclosure addendum behind that, a full financial inventory, every account, every asset, delivered to Foss's office 14 days before the wedding, signed and returned. "There is no disclosure argument," Adrienne said. "There is no counsel argument. There is no appreciation argument." She closed that section. Victor Hale told her what she wanted to hear. Then she turned to the final tab. "Section 14, she said. "The fraud and dissipation clause." She read it plainly, without inflection. "In the event that either party engaged in financial fraud, deliberate asset dissipation, or financial misconduct against the marital estate, that party forfeited all rights to any and all marital assets, effective upon documented finding." She looked up. David reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He removed his phone, opened the screenshot he had taken at 2 a.m. of the household account transaction history, and slid it across the desk. Adrienne picked it up. She looked at it for a long time. Her expression did not collapse or perform shock. It simply hardened, a slow, quiet shift, like something settling into place behind her eyes. She set the phone down. 3 LLCs, David said. 18 months, $4.2 million. Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Names on the LLCs? I don't have them yet." She nodded once. She reached for a legal pad. David looked out the window at the city below and made 2 decisions. He would not file first. He would let Portia execute every step of her plan. Let her feel the confidence of it. Let her believe she had already won, while he built everything she would not see coming. "Start building," he told Adrienne. "All of it." Quietly, she was already writing. He drove back to Calabasas. He pulled into the driveway. He walked through the front door and called out that his call had run long, that he was thinking they should trim those lemon trees this weekend, and did she want to go to dinner tonight? Somewhere nice. From the other room, Portia said that sounded wonderful. David called Ray at 7 the next morning. Not from his office phone. From his personal cell, the number Ray had saved under D since 2001, back when neither of them had anything worth protecting. Ray picked up on the second ring. "I need you in my office at 9, David said. "Come through the side entrance." Ray did not ask why. He just said, "I'll be there." The private office at Ashford Logistics was a corner room on the 3rd floor, with blinds that actually closed all the way, a detail David had insisted on when they renovated. He kept it simple. A desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard he used for routing problems, and a small table by the window where he and Ray had eaten lunch from paper bags more times than either of them could count. He had the blinds down when Ray walked in. Ray closed the door behind him. He read the room in about 2 seconds, the way he always did, and he sat down across from David without making it a thing. David said, "The man at Nobu. I need a name. No agencies, no paper trail. Just your people." Ray looked at him steadily. "How fast?" "Fast as you can do it quietly." Ray nodded once. "I'll make some calls." 4 days passed. David went to work every morning. He came home every evening. He asked Portia about her day. He slept beside her. He passed her the olive oil at dinner. He was very good at this. He had learned, in 20 years of business, that the most expensive thing a man could do in a negotiation was let the other side know they were in one. On the 5th day, Ray texted him 2 words, "Call me." David stepped out of a budget meeting, walked to the stairwell, and dialed. Ray's voice was different this time, not careful like before, something heavier in it. "His name is Grant Weston," Ray said. David went still. "Portia's brother," Ray said. "Same Grant Weston you met at your anniversary dinner. The one who came to you about portfolio consulting back in year 1. David remembered him. Mid-40s, good handshake, slightly too confident in the way of a man trying to sell something. He had let Grant review a portion of his personal portfolio, not the business, just some personal holdings, as a gesture of goodwill toward Portia. He had listened politely to what Grant suggested. He had thanked him and declined to take it further. Grant had not pushed. He had seemed to accept it without issue. David had not thought about Grant Weston since. "There's more," Ray said. "I had someone pull his business registration history. One of the LLCs your money went to. Weston Capital Ventures." Ray paused. "It was incorporated 8 months before your wedding." The stairwell was very quiet. David pressed his back against the wall. He looked at the gray concrete in front of him. He did not say anything. "David, I heard you. 8 months before, while y'all were still dating." David closed his eyes for a moment. The courtship played back through him, not like a memory, more like evidence, the charity gala, the way she had found him, not the other way around, The 2 years of patience, the warmth, the careful indifference to his money, never asking for anything. The first performance, he had thought, but it was never just a performance. It was an operation. The LLC was already open. The structure was already built. His name was already the target, before he had ever said hers in the presence of anyone who mattered to him. "I need to see you," David said. "Where are you?" Ray was parked in a structure off Figueroa, 3rd level, engine off. David pulled in beside him 20 minutes later. They did not go anywhere. They just sat. Ray in his car. David's window rolled down. In the yellow half-light of the parking structure, with the sound of the city moving below them. Ray had printed everything. Business registration dates, LLC filings, registered agent information, the address on the articles of incorporation. He handed the papers through the window. David read each page without rushing. He turned them over. He read them again. He thought about Portia coming downstairs in her robe 2 mornings ago, smiling at the French toast he had made her, touching his hand across the counter. He thought about Grant Weston sitting at his table, shaking Ray's hand at the anniversary dinner, complimenting the crab cakes. Ray was quiet for a long time. Then he said it the way only Ray would say it, plain and low, the way something lands when there are no words left to dress it up. "She sat across from your mama at Thanksgiving." David did not respond. He did not need to. Ray had put into one sentence what the documents could not, what the LLCs and the incorporation dates and the forensic trail could not fully capture, the specific weight of it, where the betrayal actually lived. He sat with that for a minute. Then he took out his phone and called Adrienne. "I have a name," he said when she answered. "Grant Weston, Portia's brother. I'm sending you what Ray found." He paused. "I need a forensic accountant. Today, if possible. I want every dollar traced, and I want documentation that holds up in a criminal proceeding, not just divorce court." Adrienne said, "I'll have someone on it by end of day." 3 weeks passed. David Ashford made French toast on Saturday mornings. He refilled Portia's coffee without being asked. He laughed at the right moments during her stories about people from her old job. He asked follow-up questions he already knew the answers to. He was present, warm, and completely unreadable. A man so good at performing normal that the performance itself became a kind of discipline, the way long-distance runners describe the last mile. Not comfortable, but controlled. He did not miss a beat, not once. The Santa Barbara trip was Portia's idea. She brought it up on a Thursday evening, tilting her head the way she did when she was framing something as spontaneous. "We never do anything just for us anymore." David said that sounded good. He meant it to sound easy, relaxed, the answer of a man with nothing on his mind. She booked a room at the San Isidro Ranch, a suite facing the mountains. She seemed pleased with herself in a way she worked to keep small. They drove up on a Friday afternoon. The Pacific Coast Highway was clear. Portia had the window down, her hair pulled back, and she looked genuinely happy in a way that David filed away, in a part of his mind he had built specifically for this. A room where he kept the things he could not afford to feel yet. The resort was beautiful. Old oak trees, stone paths, the smell of jasmine coming off the hillside. They had dinner on the terrace, and Portia ordered a good bottle of wine, and for 2 hours they sat in the orange evening light, talking about nothing that mattered. It was almost convincing. He understood, sitting across from her, exactly how she had done it for 3 years. The probe came over breakfast on Saturday morning, unhurried, casual in the way that only practiced things are casual. "You know what I was thinking about," Portia said, looking out at the garden with her cup in both hands. "We never really set anything up together. Financially, I mean. Everything is kind of yours, separately. I wonder sometimes if we should have done it differently." She let that sit. She was watching him from the side, not directly, the way you watch something you are trying not to spook. David considered the fruit on his plate. He looked up with a soft expression that gave her absolutely nothing. "I hear you," he said. "It's something we could talk about down the road. There's a lot on my plate with the Fresno expansion right now." He reached over and covered her hand with his. "But I'm not going anywhere." She smiled. She squeezed his hand back. She did not push. She had no reason to. In her accounting of things, she had 30 days. She had time. Sunday morning, David called Nora from the resort's back garden, early, before Portia was awake. The garden was still cool. Dew on the grass, a hummingbird working over a red flower near the stone wall. Nora picked up on the third ring, the way she always did, as if she gave every call exactly enough time to prove it was worth answering. They talked about the usual things first: her church group, the neighbor's dog, a ceiling fan she needed someone to come look at. David made a note to send someone by that week. Then Nora asked, the way she always asked, calm and without pressure, "How are things with Portia?" He had answered that question the same way for 3 years. "Good, Mama. She's good. Something easy. Something that moved them past it." This time the answer did not come. He stood in the garden with the phone against his ear. The hummingbird had moved on. The morning was very still. "I'm handling something, Mama." That was all he said. Nora was quiet. Not the quiet of surprise. The quiet of a woman who had been waiting for a sentence she already knew was coming, who had held space for it without ever naming it out loud. "I know you are," she said. "You always do." She did not ask what. She did not press. She just let those 6 words do what 6 words from Nora Ashford had always done: land clean and stay. They talked for a few more minutes about the ceiling fan. Then they said goodbye. What Portia did not know, what she could not have known, eating her breakfast on the terrace in the mountain light, was that she had spoken to her divorce attorney the previous Thursday evening, the same day she had suggested the Santa Barbara trip. The call had lasted 22 minutes. She had confirmed the filing timeline: 30 days. Her attorney had reviewed the prenup challenges again and remained confident. The asset disclosure issues, the independent counsel question, the classification language, all of it still looked viable. She had hung up the phone and gone downstairs and suggested a weekend away. And David had said, "That sounds good," and she had smiled. 30 days. That was all she needed. They drove back to Calabasas on Sunday afternoon. David carried in the bags. He set them by the stairs. He heard Portia in the kitchen, the low sound of a burner clicking on, a cabinet opening, and then, soft and unhurried underneath all of it, humming. A woman making dinner in her own home, comfortable, settled. A woman who believed the hardest part of her plan was already behind her. David stood in the doorway. He watched her. Then he stepped inside. Adrienne's office was on the 14th floor. David had been coming here for 20 years. He knew the elevator, the receptionist's name, the particular way the afternoon light came through the west-facing windows and turned everything amber by 3 o'clock. He knew the wall of bookshelves and the dark wood desk, and the 2 chairs across from it where people sat when they needed the best version of the truth, delivered without softening. He sat in one of those chairs now. Adrienne was at her desk. In front of her was a bound report, maybe 40 pages, cream-colored cover, the forensic accountant's firm name printed clean across the top. She did not open it immediately. She set her reading glasses on the desk beside it, the way she did when she wanted a moment before a difficult conversation. "The first 2 LLCs are exactly what we thought," she said. "Receiving accounts. Portia moved money in, Grant moved money around. We have the full transfer history, the account registrations, the signature authorities. It's documented thoroughly." She paused. "The third one is different." She opened the report. She turned it to face him and set it on the edge of the desk. "Meridian Path, LLC," she said. "Registered in Nevada 14 months ago. The transfers from the household account started 11 months ago, smaller increments than the other two, spread across 4 different deposit dates, structured to look like operating expenses. She let him look at the page for a moment. Meridian Path is not just a receiving account. It holds a 6% minority interest in Crestline Distribution. David looked up from the page. Adrienne's expression did not change. You know the name. He knew the name. Crestline Distribution. A mid-size freight company out of Riverside that had spent the last 14 months underbidding Ashford Logistics on 3 major contracts. Contracts David had expected to renew automatically after years of strong performance. He had lost one already. The other 2 were in review. He had assumed it was competitive pricing. He had put Ray on it. He had started running leaner margins to stay in contention. He looked at the report page again. The numbers were there. The acquisition date. The investment amount. $61,000. Moved in 4 transfers from an account he had funded. Used to buy a foothold in a company that had been quietly bleeding him for over a year. Adrienne folded her hands on the desk. Grant Weston used money from your household account to invest in a direct competitor. That investment gave Crestline operating capital and, very likely, access to information that helped them structure their bids against yours. She paused, letting that settle. Portia had access to the household account. The household account received deposits from your personal operating account every month. That money was used, at least in part, to fund a company undercutting your revenue. David did not speak. This is no longer a divorce case, Adrienne said. Or rather, it is a divorce case, but that is the smallest part of what this is now. She turned another page. What we have, documented, is 3 distinct legal claims. First, fraud. The transfers alone are clear financial fraud within the marital estate, and the LLC structure demonstrates premeditation. Second, breach of fiduciary duty. A spouse has a legal obligation of financial loyalty to the marital estate. What Portia did is a documented violation of that obligation. Third, she paused, tortious interference with business operations. A third party, Grant Weston, used fraudulently obtained funds to invest in a competitor for the purpose of undermining Ashford Logistics. That is actionable, separately and personally. David was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Ray. He thought about the Crestline bids, about the calls Ray had made trying to understand why the numbers were not landing. He thought about the one contract they had already lost, the one that had covered 12 driver positions and a depot lease. He thought about the names attached to those 12 positions, people who drove his trucks, who clocked in early, who called the office when their rigs needed maintenance, people who had built their own version of a life on the reliability of what David had built. And the whole time, Portia had been humming in the kitchen. "Who does the counter-complaint name?" he asked. His voice was even. "Portia. And Grant. Personally." Adrienne held his gaze. He has no legal shelter here, no prenup, no spousal protection. He is a private individual who participated in fraud and funded a tortious business act with stolen money. David nodded once. He looked at the window. The afternoon light was going amber, the way it always did this time of day. He thought about a boy who had loaded trucks at 16 because there was no other option. He thought about what it had cost him to build something that other people depended on, what it had taken out of him, year after year, before any of it became easy. He looked back at Adrienne. "Build all of it," he said. "Fraud, dissipation, business interference, every count, every document, every dollar. I want it complete." He stood up. "When she files, I want to be ready before she leaves the courthouse parking lot." Adrienne picked up her pen. "Then let's get to work," she said. He drove himself. That was not unusual. What was unusual was the direction. South on the 110, past downtown, past the exits he normally only took on Sundays. It was a Wednesday afternoon. He had cleared his calendar without explanation and told his assistant he would be unreachable until evening. The Compton streets looked the same as they always did. Not worse, not better. Just the same. The same corner stores, the same chain-link fences, the same particular quality of light that David had never been able to find anywhere else. Not in Calabasas, not in Century City, not anywhere that his money had eventually taken him. This light was flat and honest, and it had no interest in making anything look better than it was. He parked in front of the house. It was a small house, sand-colored stucco, a strip of lawn his mother still paid a neighbor boy to cut, a security door she had installed in 2004 and refused to replace because, she said, there was nothing wrong with it. A clay pot on the porch with a succulent in it that had been there so long it had grown sideways. He knocked once. Nora opened the door in 20 seconds. She was 71 years old, and she still moved like someone who had a full schedule. She was wearing a house dress, and her reading glasses were pushed up on her forehead, which meant she had been in her chair with a book. She looked at his face. She said nothing. She opened the door wider and stepped back and let him in. The house smelled like it always smelled, something clean underneath, a candle somewhere. The particular warmth of a space that had been lived in with care for 40 years. David sat down at the kitchen table, the same table he had done homework at, the same table where Nora had spread her teacher's papers every Sunday night, the same table where he had told her, at 24, that he had just signed his first freight contract, and she had cried quietly into a dish towel and told him she always knew. Nora put the kettle on without asking. She sat across from him. He told her everything. He did not summarize. He told her about Ray's call, about the Nobu lunch and the folder and the signature, about the household account and the 3 LLCs and the $4.2 million. He told her about Grant Weston and Weston Capital Ventures, incorporated 8 months before the wedding. He told her about Crestline Distribution and the minority interest and the contracts David had lost because money siphoned from his own home had been used to help a competitor underbid him. He told her what Adrian had built and what it covered: fraud, breach of duty, tortious interference, and he told her it was all documented and that it was all ready. He told her because she deserved to know before it became public record, and because he needed to say it once, out loud, in a room that was real, to a person who had known him his entire life. When he finished, Nora was quiet. The kettle clicked off. She did not get up. She sat with it for almost a full minute. Not because she was processing it slowly, David knew, but because she was deciding what the moment actually needed. That was how she had always operated, saying the right thing instead of the fast thing. Then she said, "You're not going to let this break you." Not a question, not reassurance, a statement of fact, delivered the way she had always delivered the things she was most certain of, plainly, without decoration, with all of her weight behind it. David looked at her. "No," he said, "I'm not." "She came in here," Nora said, "sat at this table. She did not gesture at the table. She did not need to. Shook my hand, told me she loved my son." She paused, and the whole time her brother had a company waiting. "Yes." Nora nodded slowly. Her expression did not collapse into anger or grief. It settled into something harder and quieter than either of those things. The expression of a woman who had raised a child alone on a salary that should not have been enough, who had stretched and held and refused to let anything break what she was building, and who understood, without needing it explained, exactly what it meant that someone had looked at her son's life and seen only something to take. "Your daddy left," she said, "and you built all of this so that would never be the whole story." David did not answer. He did not need to. "And she knew that," Nora said. Not accusing, just naming it. Walked right through the door you left open. They sat together for a while after that. Nora made the tea. They did not talk about the case anymore. They talked about other things, her book, the neighbor boy, and the lawn, a church trip she was considering in the spring. David ate 2 of the shortbread cookies she kept in the tin above the refrigerator. When he stood to leave, Nora walked him to the door. She put one hand on his arm. "When it's done," she said, "don't you carry her with you." He nodded. He kissed her on the cheek. He walked to his car. Adrienne called at 6:47 p.m., while David was still on the 110 heading north. "Portia's attorney filed the scheduling paperwork this afternoon," she said. "They have a date. She'll serve within the next 30 days. David kept his eyes on the road. The city was lit up ahead of him, orange and white, spreading out in every direction. "Let her file," he said. "Let her feel it for exactly 1 day. And then? Then we move." The process server arrived at 10:14 on a Thursday morning. David was in the middle of a logistics review with 3 of his regional managers when his assistant knocked twice and opened the conference room door with an expression that told him everything before she said a word. He excused himself quietly, stepped into the hallway, and found a man in a gray jacket holding a manila envelope with both hands. The man looked uncomfortable. He said David's name like a question. "That's me," David said. The man held out the envelope. David took it with one hand. He looked at it for a moment. His name typed on the front. Portia's attorney's return address in the upper left corner. The thing she had been building toward for 3 years finally arrived in paper form and handed to him in the hallway of the company he built, from a single freight contract, at 24 years old. There were 4 of his employees in the hallway. He was aware of all of them. "Thank you," David said to the process server. He said it the same way he would have thanked anyone for anything. The man nodded quickly and left. David walked to his assistant's desk and handed her the envelope to hold, calmly, like it was a piece of mail he would get to later. "Hold my calls," he said. "Of course." He went into his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk. He opened the envelope and read the filing from the first page to the last. The petition for dissolution of marriage, the preliminary financial disclosures, Stafford's name printed at the bottom of every page. The number did not appear in the filing itself, but David already knew what number they were coming with. He had known it for weeks. He set the papers down. He sat with them for a few minutes. Then he called Adrienne. "She filed," he said. "I saw it come through 20 minutes ago," Adrienne said. "How are you?" "Ready." "Good." A brief pause. "Everything on our end is staged. The counter-complaint, the forensic package, the supporting documentation. It's all organized, and it's all ready to go the moment you give the word." "Tomorrow," David said. "Let her have tonight." By the time David drove home that evening, Portia was already gone. She had packed in advance. He had known she would. He had noticed 2 weeks ago that certain things had begun disappearing from the house in careful, quiet increments. Small things, the kind of things a person might take one at a time without being noticed. Her side of the closet had a little more space than it used to. A framed photo from her nightstand was gone. He had said nothing. The house was still. He walked through it slowly. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway. Everything was where it had always been. His things. Her absence made the rooms feel less like loss and more like accuracy, like the house was finally telling the truth about itself. His phone rang at 8:22 p.m. Portia's name on the screen. He answered on the second ring. "David." Her voice was soft, careful. She had practiced this, too. "I know this is a lot. I want you to know that I didn't want it to get here." He said nothing. He let her continue. "I just think we both deserve to be happy, right? This doesn't have to be a war. I hope we can handle this like adults, like 2 people who actually cared about each other." She paused. "I did care about you. I want you to know that." David looked out the window at the dark backyard. The same yard he had stood in 100 times. The same view. "I'll see you in court, Portia," he said. A beat of silence. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." She hung up. She called Grant before the elevator reached the hotel lobby. "It's done," she said. "He's served. I talked to him. He sounds exactly like you'd expect." "Resigned?" "Resigned?" Grant laughed. She could hear ice in a glass. "Good. Let him be. Stafford knows this prenup inside and out. The challenges are solid. 2 weeks, maybe less, before they're looking to settle. And when they do, 250 million, Portia said. 250 million, Grant confirmed. "Come up to the room." I ordered champagne. She stepped out of the elevator and walked down the hall toward room 714. The carpet was thick and quiet under her heels. Through the window at the end of the corridor, the city glittered all the way to the hills. She had been waiting 3 years for this feeling. She let herself have it. David did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate yet. He ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter. Leftover rice and chicken from 2 days ago, food Portia had not made. He cleaned up after himself. He sat in the living room for a while with the television off. At 10:45, he called Adrienne one last time. "Tell me we're ready," he said. "We're ready," she said. No hesitation. No qualification. "Good night, Adrienne." "Good night, David." He went upstairs. He got into bed. The house was quiet. He closed his eyes. The 14th floor of Adrienne's building looked out over Century City in every direction. Glass towers, wide boulevards, the Santa Monica Mountains faint and pale in the morning haze. It was a clear day. The kind of Los Angeles morning that looked like a promise. David had arrived 30 minutes early. He sat at the far end of the conference table with a cup of coffee he had not touched. His jacket was dark navy. His tie was simple. He looked like a man who had come to a business meeting, because that was exactly what this was. He heard them before he saw them. Footsteps in the hallway, the low murmur of Stafford's voice giving last-minute instructions. Then the door opened. Portia came in first. She was dressed carefully. Charcoal and cream, understated jewelry, hair pulled back. She looked composed in the way that only comes from practice, not calm, but controlled. Her eyes moved to David immediately, and she gave him a small, measured look, something that was almost sympathetic. The way a person looks at someone they have already decided is finished. Grant came in behind her. He had no seat at this table and no legal right to one, and Adrienne's assistant had told him so politely at the door. He had smiled and said he preferred to observe. He sat against the far wall in one of the chairs usually reserved for junior associates, close enough to watch everything. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too sharp for a man with nothing official to do in this room. His eyes moved around the table and landed briefly on David, with a satisfaction he did not bother to disguise. Stafford took his seat across from Adrienne and set his briefcase on the table. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. He had the easy confidence of someone who has delivered bad news to powerful people many times and enjoys it. Adrienne said good morning. She folded her hands on the table. Stafford opened. He was smooth, practiced. He laid out the community property framework in clear, unhurried terms. California law, equitable division, the legal principles that governed what happened to assets accumulated during a marriage. He acknowledged the existence of the prenuptial agreement with the particular smile of someone who thinks they know something you do not. He said they had reviewed it thoroughly. He said they had identified multiple grounds for challenge: signing under incomplete disclosure, ambiguous asset classification language, inadequate independent counsel at the time of execution. Then he reached into his briefcase and removed a document. He slid it across the table toward Adrienne with 2 fingers. "Our settlement demand," he said. Adrienne picked it up. She looked at it without expression. She set it down. Portia turned to David. Not through Stafford, not through pleasantries, directly to him. the way she had not done since the early days of the marriage, when she was still making him believe she was something she was not. Her voice was quiet, iron underneath it. "David, you built something remarkable." She held his gaze without blinking. "I was there for it. I supported it. And the law says that entitles me to half. $250 million. A small pause. "I think that's more than fair. And I think deep down you know it too." She had rehearsed this. He could tell. She had rehearsed it in hotel mirrors and over the phone with Grant, and maybe even in her sleep. She had been living toward this moment for 3 years. David said nothing. He looked at Adrienne. Adrienne set the settlement demand down and did not look at it again. She opened her own file. 41 pages, every tab color-coded, every margin annotated in her handwriting. She placed it on the table in front of her, the way a carpenter sets down a tool they built themselves and know completely. "Before we discuss settlement," she said, "I'd like to walk through the prenuptial agreement in full. I wrote it. I want to make sure we're all reading the same document." Stafford's smile held. "Of course." Adrienne began to read. She did not rush. She read the asset classification framework first, the language that defined, with surgical precision, what was separate property and what was not. She read the clause that established every dollar David Ashford owned before the date of marriage. Ashford Logistics, every subsidiary, every real estate holding, every investment account, every equity position, and every dollar of appreciation since, as irrevocable separate property. She paused there. She looked at Stafford directly. $500 million, built before this marriage, not subject to division, not subject to claim, not a marital asset in any legal sense. She turned one page. Not a cent of it. Stafford's smile disappeared. He pulled his own copy of the prenup toward him and started flipping through it quickly, looking for the gaps he had told Portia existed. Adrienne kept reading. The independent counsel clause, the disclosure addendum, a full financial inventory provided to Portia's attorney before the wedding, signed and acknowledged. The notarized signatures on every page, every challenge Stafford had planned, dissolved before he could raise it. Then she reached the final tab. "Section 14, she said. "The fraud and dissipation clause." She read it plainly. "In the event that either party engaged in financial fraud, deliberate asset dissipation, or misconduct against the marital estate, that party forfeited all rights to any and all marital assets upon documented finding." She closed the document. "We have documentation of $4.2 million transferred from the joint marital account to 3 LLCs over 18 months. We have forensic accounting. We have a complete paper trail." She folded her hands. "We also have the incorporation records for Weston Capital Ventures, one of those 3 LLCs, showing a registration date 8 months before this marriage began." She did not look at Grant. She did not need to. "And we have documentation showing those funds were used to acquire a minority interest in a direct competitor of Ashford Logistics, which has been underbidding the company on contracts for the past year." The room was very quiet. Grant had gone the color of old paper. He was very still against the wall. Stafford was no longer flipping pages. He was sitting with both hands flat on the table, staring at a document he had clearly never truly understood. Portia had not moved. She was sitting exactly as she had been when she delivered her speech. Same posture, same position. But the certainty that had been in her eyes 60 seconds ago was gone. Completely gone. What was there instead was something David had never seen on her face across 3 years of marriage, 3 years of mornings, 3 years of performances. She had no next move. She was sitting at the end of something she had planned for years, and it looked nothing like she thought it would. David stood. He looked at Portia. Not at Stafford. Not at the document. At her. You came in here for $250 million. His voice was calm. Not cruel, just exact. Half of what I built before you knew my name. You're leaving with nothing. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. And you signed every page yourself. He looked at Adrienne. I'll be in the car. He walked to the door and opened it, and did not look back. The counter-complaint landed 2 days after the preliminary conference. Adrienne filed it on a Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, it had been served on both Portia and Grant Weston personally. Not through their attorneys, personally. Their names on the documents, their addresses on the service records. Nowhere left to hide behind representation or process. Fraud, dissipation of marital assets, tortious interference with business operations. Grant was named individually. No corporate shield, no LLC buffer. Just Grant Weston, his name, his actions, his exposure. The competitor logistics firm, a mid-size operation called Meridian Freight, whose sudden aggressive pricing on 3 major contracts had cost Ashford Logistics real money over the past year, moved fast once their attorneys understood what the forensic accounting showed. Nobody wanted to be holding fraudulently obtained investment funds when a federal paper trail was already built. Within 10 days, Meridian had filed their own internal review. Within 3 weeks, 2 of the 3 contested contracts were pulled back for reevaluation. Both were ultimately returned to Ashford Logistics. The third went to bid. Ashford won it anyway. Grant's consulting practice did not survive the month. His clients were not many. The practice had always been modest, propped up more by ambition than by performance. But word moved fast in Los Angeles financial circles, and the fraud complaint was not a quiet document. 2 clients terminated their agreements in the first week. A third stopped returning calls. By the end of the month, the office was dark, and the phone had stopped ringing for good. Grant Weston, who had spent 3 years engineering a scheme he believed would fund the expansion of a legitimate business, was left with nothing to expand, and no one willing to trust him with theirs. He called Portia twice. She did not answer either time. Stafford withdrew from Portia's case formally, citing a scheduling conflict. It was a professional courtesy, a clean exit from a case that had stopped being winnable the moment Adrienne read Section 14 aloud. A second attorney reviewed the file and declined representation without explanation, which was explanation enough. The third attorney worked out of a small office in Burbank. Compact waiting room, generic landscape prints on the walls, the particular fluorescent hum of a place that does not pretend to be more than it is. He sat across from Portia, reviewed the case file for 40 minutes, and told her the truth in plain language. The fraud findings eliminate your negotiating position entirely, he said. You're not looking at a reduced settlement. You're looking at nothing. She settled for nothing. The case closed quietly. No trial. No dramatic final hearing. Just signatures on documents that confirmed what the prenup and the forensic accounting had already made inevitable. Before the final paperwork was signed, Portia called David directly and asked for a private meeting. No attorneys, just the 2 of them. He agreed without hesitation. They met in a small conference room in a neutral office building in Westwood. Nothing memorable about it? A table, chairs, windows looking out at an unremarkable parking structure. David arrived first and sat down. When Portia came in, she looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally stopped pretending it wasn't heavy. She sat across from him. She did not have a speech this time. What she had instead was something that looked, from the outside, like honesty. She talked for several minutes. She said she got lost. She said the plan and the person became 2 different things somewhere along the way, and she did not know how to separate them once they had. She said that what started as calculation became something more complicated, and that she understood if he did not believe her, but that she needed him to know it. She asked, with a directness that had none of the iron of the conference room in it. If there was anything at all, she could leave with. Not money. Just something. Some acknowledgement that 3 years meant something to at least one of them. David listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. He did not shift in his seat. He let her finish completely. And when she was done, he was quiet for a moment, just looking at her, the way a man looks at something he has already made his peace with. Then he spoke. "You sat at my mother's table." His voice was calm. No heat in it. "You shook Ray's hand at my company's anniversary dinner. You looked me in the eye every morning for 3 years. He paused. "And the whole time, your brother had an LLC ready to catch what you were stealing." Portia did not look away. "Whatever you felt later doesn't change what you planned before," David said. "There is no version of this where I give you anything. Not a dollar, not my silence, not a reference if you come near what I built again." He stood up. "I hope your next life is one you actually want to live. Because this one cost you everything, and you spent it badly." He walked to the door. He opened it. He did not look back. He was not angry when he left. He was not sad. He was simply finished with it. The way you are finished with something that asked too much and gave back too little, and is now, finally, behind you. 3 years passed, the way years pass when a man is building something real. Not slowly, not quickly, just steadily, one decision at a time. David Ashford was 47 years old. Ashford Logistics had expanded into 4 new markets. The Business Journal profile came out in the spring, a cover story on asset protection and leadership resilience that David had agreed to reluctantly, and that used none of the words he would have used to describe what happened. He said only one thing in the interview that he meant completely. "The most dangerous threats to what you build come from inside. The answer is preparation." It has always been preparation. Portia Weston, she had returned to her maiden name, lived in Phoenix. She worked in property management for a mid-size firm. She did not speak publicly about David Ashford. She did not contact him. She did not come near anything he had built. Grant worked a junior role at a small financial services firm in the Valley. His name was on nothing. His access was limited. He was supervised closely by people who did not know his history and managed the accounts of people who would never be his. He had learned, at great cost and far too late, to be very careful about money that was not his. Ray was still COO, still David's best friend, still owed him $20 from a 2003 bet about whether a particular downtown restaurant would survive the year. The restaurant had been gone for 15 years. The debt remained unresolved by mutual unspoken agreement, and always would be. Nora still made Sunday dinner. David still drove himself there. On a Tuesday morning, David sat in his home office. Same modest room, same desk. The kind of space that had never tried to announce what it housed. No statement furniture, no awards on the walls, just a working room where a man thought through hard problems and made decisions that held. On the corner of the desk sat a framed photograph. Himself and Nora at his first warehouse in 1999. He was 23 in the photograph. Thin, serious. Holding a clipboard with both hands, his eyes aimed slightly off camera at something the photographer could not see. Already calculating. Already working a problem that only he could see. He looked at it for a long moment. He had never been going to lose. He had known that. Somewhere underneath the grief and the discipline and the 45 minutes he sat motionless in his office after Ray's phone call, he had always known it. He had just needed her to find out. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.